Hey people, today is Open Streets TO, where they close off some major downtown streets to traffic and open it up to pedestrians. So we're on Bloor Street right now, which is closed off all the way up to Ossington, and Yonge Street is closed off from Bloor down to Queen. So we're going to walk down Yonge Street, and I'll point out some, interesting things here and there, whatever catches my eye. About Yonge Street, Toronto's most famous street. Yonge Street is just up ahead at that next intersection. It's raining right now, but I thought, what the heck? I don't very often do walking videos in the rain, so why not? This stretch of Bloor Street up ahead is known as the Mink Mile because it's lined with luxury retailers, like Tiffany's and Hermes and, all those high-end luxury clothing retailers. There's a bunch of music playing now, and I don't know if it's going to trigger my channel to get copyrighted or not, so I'm going to talk over it, because you never know. You never know what YouTube is going to do when they hear music playing. So blah blah blah, we can't hear this song, I don't know what it is. Do you know? I don't know. Nobody knows. I don't know this song at all. I've never heard it before. Why does it have to be so damn loud? So there's Bloor Street up there. Looking north up Yonge Street. There again, still talking over the music. Now we're starting to go south on Yonge Street. This music is still going. They really like to blast music all the time at these things, and I kind of find it a little annoying actually. Right now we're walking by 1 Bloor East, which is a newly completed condo tower. It's like 75 stories. And at the base of the condo, they have the newly opened Chick-fil-A, although it's closed today, being Sunday, since that company does not open on Sundays due to religious reasons. I had another video recently showing the huge lineup that was here when the store first opened. Talked about the protesters lying on the sidewalk. It was a ridiculous scene, So it's pretty quiet right now. It's kind of a drag. It has to rain on the day when they close down Yonge Street, but it makes for a more interesting video. Here we have one of the last remaining strip clubs on Yonge Street. The street used to be lined with strip clubs and adult magazine shops and peep shows and massage parlors. It was quite the seedy place, especially throughout the 70s and 80s. It's been really cleaned up since then, but still has a seedy element to it. We'll walk by the other remaining strip club later on. I'm just gonna walk right down the middle of the street. More music playing. Look up Charles Street. The street, like, you know, less than 10 years ago was mainly just low-rise houses and apartment buildings, and it's been completely transformed with high-rise condominiums.
145, right? Good check.
One time, Yonge Street was known as like an entertainment street. It was lined with bars and nightclubs. That was mainly in, like, you know, from the 50s and 60s. It was a destination street for nightlife. It's not really anymore known as a nightlife street, but most of the bars and nightclubs have gone, but there's still theaters and there's tons of restaurants. It's mostly restaurants and retail now, and it's still a really busy street. Even at night it's still busy, just with people walking to restaurants and whatnot. But the character of the street has really changed. Like I was saying earlier, it used to be a sleazy strip of adult entertainment. Got to the point where it was so bad that people started calling it the Sin Strip, and it was basically just massage parlors just lining the street, X-rated movie theaters, strip clubs galore, adult magazine shops, peep shows, all that stuff that I mentioned. And what happened in the late 70s, around 1977, was a young boy, a shoeshine boy, was murdered on the street and found on the roof of one of the massage parlors, and caused such a huge uproar that the city had no choice but to clean up Yonge Street. People were just so outraged, they just couldn't believe that happened. So most of the massage parlors were forced off the street. The street still, you know, was seedy through the 80s with other forms of adult entertainment and into the 90s, but then in the later 90s things started to really change. They redeveloped Yonge and Dundas into Yonge Dundas Square, and more chain type restaurants and whatnot started moving into the area. And it kind of similar story to what happened at Times Square in New York City. Now it's well, it still has a seedy element, don't get me wrong, but it's mostly a much more family-friendly area now around Yonge and Dundas, with the Eaton Center, all the chain stores, the movie theater, lots of big-name retailers. It's busier than ever, but it's definitely you know, not the Sin Strip it used to be. We were passing by another new condominium development here. This used to be a row of old retail buildings here. They were pretty unremarkable buildings, so I wasn't really that bothered when they were demolished for this new development. Some of the old buildings really have a lot of character, but some of them didn't at all. Some of them were just very plain. The ones that do have a lot of character and historical value, they tend to retain them, such as this development here. This is a new condominium that was built in the last 5 years or so, and they retained and restored all these old storefronts here. And I just stepped in a big puddle. So these old buildings were refurbished and they look better than ever now. The only drawback is sometimes some of the original retailers, which tended to be a little more diverse, get replaced by corporate chain retailers or banks. More upscale, less accessible. This used to be a famous music venue. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but in the movie Wayne's World, Mike Myers, who is from Toronto, named the venue that they go to in Aurora, Illinois after it. And the name is right on the tip of my tongue, I just can't think of it right now. But if you know the movie Wayne's World, you know the bar they go to, where they first see Cassandra playing. The name of that bar is the name of what that building used to be. So yeah, look it up, Google it. Not sure what happened there. Something happened. That lady was talking to the police about something.
The entire plan was to buy.
I just remembered the name of that club. The Gasworks. I'm pretty sure that's it, the Gasworks. So there you go. If you're a fan of Wayne's World, just know that the Gasworks was actually a Toronto, rock and roll club, metal. Lots of things in Wayne's World were actually references to Toronto. Mike Myers just sort of translated over to his fictional version of Aurora, Illinois, which is a real town, but he kind of, Toronto'd it up a bit. Coincidentally, Toronto also has a suburb called Aurora. I don't know if that's why Wayne or Mike Myers chose Aurora, Illinois as the setting for the Wayne's World movies, maybe. Another new development. This one will be 52 stories at the other end, the other tower. This used to be an ugly strip plaza that was built in the 50s after the original buildings burned down. And it was sort of the bane of a lot of people's existence on Yonge Street because it just didn't fit in with the rest of the street. It had some interesting retailers, that's definitely true, but the building itself was just like an oddball. It did not fit in at all with Yonge Street. So when it was torn down, a lot of people were pretty happy about that. And hopefully the new retailers at the base of this condo will be at least somewhat interesting and not more banks or Shoppers Drug Marts or whatever mostly these condos end up having at the base of them, because that's pretty boring when you see that over and over again. Another new condo development going up right here. They retain this old clock tower and incorporate it into the base of the building. I believe the buildings that were here weren't all that remarkable, but one of them was a pretty famous bar for the gay community in the earliest days of before the village existed, really, before the gay village existed. Some of the venues along Yonge Street were havens for the gay community. Yet another new condo that just recently completed. Although the base here hasn't been fully leased yet. See, we got Toronto Film School, another bank. I hate it when banks go into the base of these buildings. At least give us at least a restaurant or two, you know, or something interesting. This is a pretty tall building here. It's 66 stories, something like that. Yeah, coming up on College Street. I did an earlier video showing the rush hour activity at this intersection, Yonge and College. If you want to check that out, by all means. Well, I think I hear the singing guy. Just in the last little while, there's been this guy who's appeared. Never used to see him at all before. In the last month or so, he's suddenly on the streets of Toronto, walking around singing, and this is him right here. And he's usually singing no more than 3 different songs that I've heard. I just did a video yesterday of the intersection of Yonge and Dundas, showing how crazy busy that intersection is, and the singing guy actually appears in that video too. Walking by College Park, which is a large retail and residential building. Come and take a look at this mural here. These have been just recently painted, like in the last few years. I was mentioning earlier that Yonge Street used to be known for its music and bars and nightclubs, and this mural on the side of the building depicts the musical history of Yonge Street back in its musical heyday. You can see all the various famous personalities that played all the clubs on Yonge Street. Some of these are really famous people. I don't know, I'm sure I could name a few of them. Is that Joe Cocker right there? Is that Cab Calloway maybe? I don't know, I'm not sure who that guy is, but John Lee Hooker maybe? I don't know, famous blues and rock and roll people from back in the day. And the other side of the building has more people. We are at the other end of the building. These little parquettes are fairly new. Kind of really improves the aesthetic of the streetscape. I think I see Rush up there. I see Getty and Alex and Neil. See some of the names of some of the former bars and clubs. Steele's Tavern, Brown Derby Tavern, that was a really famous one. I think that was right at the corner of Yonge and Dundas. Now the building no longer exists because I think it was replaced by the 10 Dundas East complex.
What?
There's the park behind College Park up there. It's just newly renovated. Looks really nice. I feature that in one of my earlier videos. Not too many people lounging on the chairs right now. They do have umbrellas though. We're walking by the Aura condominium right now, which as of now is the tallest residential building in Toronto. 78 stories, just shy of 900 feet or 274 meters. I forgot to point out though, right up at the corner of Yonge and Bloor, there's a new building under construction. I've mentioned it in several of my previous videos, which will be the new tallest residential building in Toronto at over 1,000 feet, 309 meters. It's called One Bloor West, which is directly across the street from One Bloor East, the condominium that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. And that will be not only the tallest residential building in Toronto, but it will be the tallest building in Toronto, period. Excluding the CN Tower, of course. And here, this construction site here, will be another really tall tower, which will be taller than the Aura building right across the street, but not as tall as One Bloor West, so it'll be 299 meters, just 1 meter shy of super tall status. And they're retaining the historical building here to incorporate into the base of the building. Which is a common practice in Toronto, called facadism, which I've mentioned several times in previous videos, as there's examples all over the downtown area where these old buildings are basically torn down, but they leave maybe 1 or 2 walls standing, like facing the street, and the rest of the building is basically demolished. And then they build a new building on top of it, and then once it's complete, it looks like the old building is still there on the corner with the new building on top of it, but it's not really there. It's just a wall. You can see another one here, the retaining also. You can see how it's just basically the front facade is all that's left of this building. And right here, a 85-story condo will rise. You can see the wall of this building here. Yonge Street is becoming more and more of a high-rise canyon over the years, although I don't think they're going to completely get rid of these old low-rise commercial buildings. They'll most likely retain them and incorporate them into the base of the new towers. It's starting to rain heavier now. Here's the other remaining strip club on Yonge Street. It's quite the famous place here. It's actually gotten flashier over the years. It used to be a lot more plain looking, but they don't seem to be going anywhere, so hopefully they don't, because I mean, I'd like to see the street retain some of its former seediness. I don't want it to be completely gentrified. It would become boring if you ask me. And I really like the chaotic signage on the street too, you know? It's very visually interesting. This is a new building. This used to be the site of the famous Sam the Record Man, which was an iconic record store in Toronto, mainly due to its neon spinning record signs. It started out with one huge neon spinning record, and then a second one was added in the 80s, I believe, and then some smaller ones were just started out as a simple storefront and became more and more garish and neon as the years went by, and became a symbol of Yonge Street. And then of course the decline of record stores and whatnot happened in the 2000s, and all the record stores that used to line Yonge Street started closing one by one. There used to be a lot of record stores on the street. Besides Sam's, used to be A&A Records, which was another huge record store with a big flashy neon sign. And right here, where Tokyo Smoke is now, which is a marijuana store, used to be HMV, the flagship HMV store. Was just closed in the last couple years. It was the last big record store on Yonge Street, because Sunrise Records was across the street where that Now Leasing sign is. That was another big record store. One by one they just started falling. Tower Records was also up at Yonge and Queen at one point. It's kind of sad because I really love browsing in record stores. It's just something that doesn't happen anymore. Of course there's still record stores around. There's the small independent record stores, mostly on streets like Queen Street, College Street, kind of the more neighborhood retail strips and whatnot away from the downtown, and they're really cool. But it was always fun to come right to the heart of downtown and have all these big giant record stores and bookstores as well, you know, like the world's biggest bookstore, which used to be here at this
construction site you see now with the tower cranes. At one time that was a very iconic bookstore. It used to be a bowling alley, and then it was converted into a gigantic bookstore, which they called the world's biggest bookstore. You know, not to be taken literally, I'm sure. I don't think it was really the world's biggest bookstore, but it was probably a contender because it was huge. And I would spend hours browsing in there, hours and hours. And then, same as the record stores, all the bookstores started dying. You see BMV Books is still there, which is a pretty darn good location. They have a few different locations around the city, so they're still going. If you ever see the movie Short Circuit or Short Circuit 2, which it's filmed in Toronto, they have a scene in what used to be the world's biggest bookstore. There you see the Silver Snail, which is probably Toronto's most famous comic book shop. Recently relocated here from Queen Street, where it was based for years on Queen Street, and then I think they lost their lease or they couldn't afford to pay the rent anymore, so then they moved here to Yonge and Dundas, which is a good location for them to be. And it's a big store, lots of room, so many comics in there. Oh my god, you could spend days browsing in there. And there's quite a few other comic shops around town that are still going, even though that's another dying retailer, you know. The internet has just killed off so many things. Ugh. We are coming up to Yonge and Dundas. I did a video yesterday. It's definitely a bit quieter today than it was yesterday due to this lovely weather. Here's the corner where the Brown Derby Tavern used to be. Dundas Square. Not sure what's happening over here. Let's go check it out. Protest. Seems to be a protest. There we go. Freedom for all, freedom for Kashmir. Indian Army out of Kashmir.
Troops out now! Troops out now! Troops out now! Troops out now!
Fairly empty Dundas Square. I've been working on this new video screen literally for months, adding a new section of the screen like every couple of weeks, it seems like. It's taking forever. When it's done, it's going to be a huge screen though, but I don't know why it's taking so long.
It almost seems like they're manufacturing each piece of the screen, installing it, and then manufacturing a new piece, and then installing it.
Must be filled with the sword. This is the last book of the Bible. First,
What do we have over here now?
Alright? So let's get back to the list. We're out of here.
Job chapter 20, verse 6 goes, Excellency mount up to the heavens, and his head reach unto the clouds. Yet he shall perish forever, like his own dung. They which have seen him shall say, Where is he?
That's what's going to be said.
Those are the black Hebrew Israelites. They're usually here every weekend. They usually stand up at the corner of Dundas and Victoria, though, because they've moved over. They have some interesting things to say if you want to Google them. Yeah, quite the gloomy day. Oh yeah, this Shoppers Drug Mart used to be the site of the Hard Rock Cafe, which couldn't afford to renew the lease at this location, so they had to leave. And it was North America's first Hard Rock Cafe, as far as I know. Hopefully they'll find a new location somewhere. I know it's a chain restaurant and all that, but it was a somewhat interesting place, at least, you know. Bit of a tourist draw. Here we have the Ed Mervis Theater, which has had many name changes over the years. Lots of Broadway type shows take place here. Paramount Restaurant, which used to be a well-known Greek restaurant, which was trashed during the anti-Greek riots in 1918, which is quite the interesting historical event. If you want to look that up. A giant riot, tens of thousands of people rampaging through Toronto, destroying every Greek-owned business that they could find, basically. Sort of a backlash during the First World War. People were frustrated and upset with the Greek community because they didn't have to enlist in the war, and they seemed to be prospering with their businesses and whatnot, while other Canadians who were citizens, the Greeks weren't considered citizens at that time, so the Canadians who were, lots of them, of course, were sent off to war, and, you know, of course, there was lots of suffering and death and whatnot, and people were having a hard time, and the Greek community was thriving. Well, you know, like, why wouldn't they, right? I mean, they were filling a niche. They had restaurants and businesses to serve the populace. They were doing good, and some people didn't like it, so they took out their frustrations and basically tried to destroy their livelihoods. Quite the big rush. By the way, we've been walking past the Eaton Centre ever since we crossed Dundas Street, which is a giant downtown shopping mall, although they've sort of disguised the
exterior of the mall to look like storefronts here. So if you didn't know there was a mall there, you know, it'd be understandable because it's hard to tell there is a mall there. It's a huge mall though, huge multi-level mall, and it's incredibly busy. Entrance to the mall. These two old historical buildings here sat neglected and empty for years. No interest from anybody. And then finally a developer bought this one and incorporated it into the base of this new condo building. See here, 60-story condo. And yeah, so now this building is basically the lobby of the condo. Beautiful old building. Now this other one here is for sale, as far as I know. It's been for sale before with no interest, but maybe now that this neighboring building has been restored and this new residential component is here, maybe someone will take interest in this old building now.
I think that's
one time Tower Records was located here in this building on the corner of Yonge and Queen, which is being refurbished now. For the longest time it was another retailer, clothing retailer, and the building was covered up with weird green siding and completely obliterated its original historical look. So now it's being restored to its original brick facade, and I believe the top, they're going to add like a few new stories for like a restaurant up on top, I believe. Should look really nice. This is the end of the open street section of Yonge Street. See what the new building will look like, or the old building will look like when it's finished, its restoration. And you can see the clock tower of Old City Hall peeking out there. Saks Fifth Avenue, which at one time this was the Bay. The Bay is still here. It's on the other side of the building now. Now known as the Hudson's Bay Company, which was its original name. So now the Hudson's Bay Company and Saks Fifth Avenue share this location. Prior to the Bay being here, I believe this was the Simpsons department store, which is a now defunct chain of Canadian department stores. I didn't mention that the Eaton Center was named after another department store called Eaton's, which was another huge Canadian chain of department stores which no longer exists. Although the mall retained its name just because people knew it as the Eaton Center, and it'll always be known as the Eaton Center, even without Eaton's. This section of Yonge Street south of Queen is part of the financial district neighborhood. Building here, the Dining Coffee Company, it underwent a revitalization basically the same as what's happening up the street there. They refurbished the look and brought it back to its original brick facade, and they added a rooftop restaurant. So they're basically repeating the process up the street. Really good. These buildings were all basically redone. They were moved over when this new office tower was built. It's hard to even remember what they looked like before, but they did not used to look like this. I believe they were physically relocated up from that corner to this corner, so it's just like they're still here, but they're not where they used to be. This was the Trump Tower, but it's no longer the Trump Tower. The Trump name has been banished from that building forever. Up Adelaide Street. Nice looking canyon. This end of Yonge Street is a lot taller and more imposing than the areas north of Queen. The buildings are, well, being in the financial district, they tend to be pretty tall. Lots of them are old. The street really does change its character and look quite a few times as you walk down. Across here. A good look up Yonge Street. See all the way up to Bloor. See the tall one Bloor East condo way up there. You can see some of the old office towers. Buildings are like 100 years old. King Street. The person wants to go. Here you can see this old office tower is being refurbished. This is my favorite of the old office blocks in downtown. So hopefully when it's done its restoration, it looks better than ever. I thought it looked fantastic already, but this is my favorite part of Yonge Street right here. Nice old building here too. It's now part of the One King West residential development. See Commerce Court and the old Commerce Court building. See there. See the base of it. And its big brother that was built in the early 70s. Wellington Street. Beautiful old buildings here. And another new condo. Normally I hate these scaffoldings that are all over the downtown core because everywhere there's buildings being built or renovated everywhere. But on a rainy day, they're kind of nice, you know, a little bit of a temporary shelter. Battery is about to die. Here we are at Yonge in front. You can see the Dominion Public Building. We have the CN Tower. And further up, past Bay Street, Union Station is up there. So we have the Hockey Hall of Fame, which is in a former bank building. Another famous historical building, been retained for new purposes. This is a pretty big tourist attraction here. See some of the bank towers of the financial district. The newly renamed Meridian Hall. It's a performance venue. It's gone through many name changes over the years. Yonge Street continues down to the lakeshore, but I think I'll end my video here. The rest of Yonge Street, there's really not much in terms of restaurants or retail or anything. It's just basically a transportation corridor basically here now connecting it to the Gardiner Expressway with some new residential condo developments popping up along the way. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed my narrated tour of Yonge Street. Now it looks like the sun is coming out. Maybe I can close this umbrella. Alright, so I'll see you next time.